Have you ever felt like something invisible is silently working against you, right when everything seems to be going fine? What if those moments of chaos and delay aren't just bad luck, but signs of something deeper, something intentional? The Stoics believe that what blocks our path becomes the path. But what if the block isn't internal? What if it's being placed there? Let's take a step back for a moment. Have you ever suddenly felt a tightness in your chest, like a strange weight pressing down for no clear reason? Or maybe you've sensed the energy in a room shift subtly, but unmistakably, as if something unseen was working quietly against your peace. We often brush these feelings off as stress or coincidence. But what if they aren't? What if they're signals? In this video, we're going to uncover a set of hidden patterns, subtle signs that most people completely miss. And if you're feeling stuck, lost, or like the universe is somehow working against you, you might not be imagining things. This might not be bad luck. It might be something more, something deliberate. Whether or not you believe in spiritual interference, one thing is certain. The effects can feel incredibly real. Low energy, fractured relationships, that lingering, unshakable sense that something just isn't right. This video isn't about fear, it's about clarity. Because once you recognize these signs, they lose their power over you. You're no longer a passive target. You take your power back. So if there's even a small part of you that feels like something in your life is off, don't click away. What you're about to hear may be exactly what you need to regain your strength and your peace. #1. Persistent blockages in goals and personal growth. Sometimes, even when you're showing up with focus, discipline, and intention, nothing moves. Everything you try to build seems to crumble. The doors that once opened with ease now feel sealed shut. Progress slows to a crawl. Your motivation dims. It's not exhaustion, it's something heavier. A fog. A weight on your willpower. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once said, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." But here's the real question. What if what you're experiencing isn't fate at all, but interference? Let me tell you a real story. Malik was a rising fashion entrepreneur. For months, his momentum was unstoppable, his brand was growing fast, and everything was lining up for his biggest product launch yet. Then, within days, it all unraveled. His supplier abruptly dropped out. His website began glitching in ways that no developer could explain. And just before launch, several influencers backed out of paid partnerships without warning, without reason. Everything had been planned to perfection. And still, everything collapsed. Witchcraft doesn't always come wrapped in theatrics. Sometimes, it works through silence. It doesn't scream, it blocks. It halts momentum just as you're approaching the finish line. Not just to make you fail, but to make you doubt that you were ever meant to succeed. Earlier, we talked about obstacles that seem to appear out of nowhere. Barriers that don't just slow your momentum, but shut things down completely. But before you can overcome these blockages, you need to ask yourself a hard question. Were they random? Or were they placed there on purpose? Marcus Aurelius once said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." It's a powerful idea. But let's be honest, how can you transform an obstacle into a path if you don't even know where it came from? If you're stuck, especially in parts of your life that once moved smoothly, pay attention. When things suddenly stop working, when progress stalls again and again for no clear reason, that's a signal. And when logic can't explain it, awareness becomes your first shield. Knowing that something's off is the first step to protecting yourself from it. #2. When the body whispers what the soul already knows, sometimes your body starts sounding the alarm long before your mind catches on. You wake up already exhausted, not from lack of sleep, but from something you can't quite explain. It's a fatigue that no cup of coffee, no amount of rest, no blood test can resolve. It's like your entire being is moving through wet cement, dragging a heaviness that doesn't belong to you. This isn't just burnout. This isn't a bad week. This is your soul trying to speak through the only messenger it has, your body. Epictetus said, "The body is the servant of the soul." But what happens when that servant starts to break down without any clear cause? What if the soul is under quiet siege? Take Linda, for example. She was the kind of person who radiated energy. Charismatic, driven, the life of every room. She ran a business, attended events, stayed energized well into the night. Then, without warning, her light began to dim. It started around 2 p.m. every day. She would crash hard. Not the usual afternoon slump, but complete depletion, like someone pulled the plug. Her body felt heavy, like a battery that wouldn't charge. She went to doctors, ran every test, changed her diet, took supplements, slept more, but nothing changed. Nothing explained it, and it didn't stop with fatigue. Soon, her emotions started shifting too. Deep sadness would appear out of nowhere, then vanish just as fast. Places that once felt safe suddenly became unbearable. She avoided rooms in her own home. People she once loved became difficult to be around. She felt like she was unraveling, piece by piece. And then came the dreams. Nightmares, really. Vivid, intense, and eerily repetitive. Dark figures watching her. Sleep paralysis. That terrible sense of being watched, even while asleep. Now, some might say it's just stress, or maybe clinical depression. But here's the part that made it different. None of the standard solutions helped. Medication, herbal remedies, meditation, even strict routines. Nothing touched the root of what she was feeling. So what do you do when the body is screaming, and no one else can hear it? Linda wasn't just unwell, she was under spiritual interference. And the Stoics, despite living in a rational world of philosophy, understood that not all battles are visible to the eye. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." But here's the key. Before you can transform an obstacle into the path, you must first be able to name what it is. And sometimes, that obstacle isn't a flaw within you. It's a force working from beyond you. In many ancient traditions, witchcraft isn't about theatrics or dramatic rituals. It's subtle. It's disruptive. It doesn't come to entertain, it comes to disarm. And its target? The very source of your strength. For some, it strikes their energy. Others lose their creativity. Some feel their self-confidence vanish overnight. And for many, it's their peace of mind that begins to crack. Whatever part of you makes you powerful, centered, and uniquely you, that's the part it aims to distort, drain, or destroy. Think about it. Artists lose their spark. Athletes suddenly suffer strange, persistent injuries. Speakers once confident and composed begin to feel anxious and tongue-tied. Even healers start to feel emotionally disoriented, as if their own energy is being blocked. That's because these attacks aren't random. They're tailored. They're precise. Linda only started to see the bigger picture when she left her environment. She visited her sister in another state, and within just a few hours of being there, something shifted. She felt lighter. Her fatigue vanished. No more anxiety. No nightmares. But every time she returned home, it all came back. Every single time. And it wasn't just the place, it was a person. A colleague who had always carried an undercurrent of envy and manipulation. After every interaction with this individual, Linda's symptoms worsened. The pattern was too sharp, too exact, to be coincidence. If you're dealing with symptoms that seem impossible to explain, and especially if nothing works to heal them, it's time to stop searching only outside of yourself and start listening inward. Begin noticing the patterns. When does the heaviness show up? Who are you with? Where are you? What just happened before it returned? This isn't paranoia. It's perception. Your body doesn't lie. It can't pretend to be in alignment when your spirit is under siege. It reacts, it tightens. It grows heavy. And often, those reactions are not just signals of imbalance. They may be your first pieces of evidence that something or someone is interfering with your peace. And when those signs, emotional, physical, and spiritual, combine with the consistent setbacks we talked about earlier, the picture becomes clearer. But there's one more dimension to consider, one that goes beyond you. What happens when the people closest to you start changing too? Let's talk about that next. Previously, we explored how your body and emotions can become battlegrounds for unseen interference. But the signs don't stop with you. Sometimes the clearest signal that something is spiritually off is when the people closest to you begin to shift. Number 3, when the people closest to you suddenly feel like strangers. Few things pierce deeper than the quiet unraveling of a once solid relationship. It doesn't come with fanfare or drama. It begins subtly, a strange silence, a distant look, a conversation that suddenly feels disconnected. One day, the friend who used to laugh with you for hours barely replies to your messages. Your trusted confidant starts avoiding eye contact. You try to piece it together. What happened? Did I miss something? But no matter how many times you replay it in your mind, nothing adds up. And that's the thing. Nothing really changed. And yet everything feels different. This kind of emotional drift is one of the more dangerous and easily missed signs of spiritual interference. When dark energy wants to destabilize you, it doesn't always attack head-on. Sometimes it moves like a shadow, silent, shapeless, but still powerful enough to choke the air between you and the people you love. Relationships that once felt like home begin to feel foreign. Familiar voices become distant echoes. Safe places turn cold. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote, "A faithful friend is a strong defense, and he that hath found such a one hath found a treasure." But what happens when that treasure suddenly feels like a stranger? Like a wall has silently grown between you? Let me tell you about Naomi. She had a close-knit circle, people she trusted, laughed with, leaned on. Her life was filled with shared memories, inside jokes, and a deep sense of belonging. Then slowly, without explanation, things started breaking apart. Her oldest friend stopped replying. Her co-workers grew distant and oddly formal. People she had loved for years began looking at her with suspicion, as if she had become someone else overnight. Even more unsettling, when Naomi reached out to fix things, explaining, apologizing, trying to reconnect, the distance only widened. And the responses were vague at best. "I don't know what it is," they would say. "You just feel different." Confused and hurt, Naomi eventually traced the pattern. The breakdowns in her relationships always seemed to deepen after one-on-one encounters with a specific individual, someone who seemed friendly, even charismatic, but always a little too curious about her personal life. someone who seemed to thrive on knowing more than they should. The Stoics didn't just teach us to guard our peace, they taught us to guard our relationships. Marcus Aurelius warned, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But it's not only our thoughts we must be careful with. Sometimes, the thoughts and energies of others can begin to color our world too. If your bonds are suddenly unraveling, if trust is breaking without cause, if the people who once supported you now seem distant or even hostile, it may be time to step back and ask, is this emotional shift truly mine, or is something else stirring it behind the scenes? We just explored how our most trusted relationships can suddenly shift, how bonds that once felt unbreakable begin to crack under mysterious pressure. But what if those changes aren't just emotional, but orchestrated? When spiritual interference targets your social world, it often doesn't strike with loud drama. Instead, it weaves quiet confusion, threading distrust, miscommunication, and subtle division right through your most meaningful connections. It might start small. A text that never arrives. An email that somehow gets lost. A phone call that feels cold without reason. Suddenly, people who once cheered you on respond with jealousy or resentment. Misunderstandings multiply, arguments from the past reignite, and sometimes, people even recall events that never happened, or forget ones that clearly did. It's like someone has taken the clean, flowing current of your relationships and jammed static into the frequency, turning harmony into tension. These emotional disruptions aren't just mood swings. They're engineered, deliberate. And the most painful part? You begin to question yourself. You ask, did I do something wrong? Did I change? Am I the problem? That confusion, it's not just collateral damage. It's part of the attack. Because when you're unsure of yourself, when you're emotionally isolated, you become more vulnerable. And vulnerability without awareness? That's when you're easiest to control. But here's what the Stoics would remind you. Not every strange behavior is born from the person in front of you. Sometimes people aren't acting from their true selves. They're reacting to energies, emotions, or spiritual influences that don't belong to either of you. So how do you protect your social world from that kind of distortion? The Stoic answer is practical and powerful. Stay grounded in reason. Document what feels off. Notice the timing. Track the patterns. And when possible, meet people in person. Why? Because electronic communication is easy to manipulate. Words on a screen can be twisted, intentions misread. But real presence, your energy, your intuition, their body language is harder to fake and much harder to corrupt. Most importantly, trust your instincts. If someone close to you suddenly feels off, don't rush to accuse, but don't dismiss that signal either. Look for consistency. Look for timing. And most of all, stay alert to patterns. Naomi eventually found her way back to peace. But it only happened after she stepped away from the chaos and consciously cleared the spiritual interference that had taken root. When she did, something became clear. The war wasn't with her friends. It was with the unseen forces moving through them. Relationships are sacred. And when they're under spiritual attack, protecting them becomes an act of both love and awareness. There's still one more domain we need to explore, one that most people dismiss far too quickly: your dreams. Especially the disturbing, recurring ones. After exploring how spiritual interference can fracture your most meaningful relationships, we now turn to something even more subtle, something physical. Because not all attacks come through people or emotions, some enter silently through objects. #4 Silent anchors. When objects speak the unseen, some of the most powerful forms of interference arrive without a sound, without a warning. They don't kick down the door. They slip in through the smallest crack, often disguised as harmless, ordinary things. It might be a strange coin tucked beneath your doormat, a pouch of powder hidden in the back of your closet, a gift that makes your skin crawl when you touch it. These aren't just odd coincidences or forgotten items. These are physical anchors, intentionally placed to tether dark spiritual energy to your space. And the more invisible they seem, the more effective they often are. This method of spiritual disruption is ancient. Across countless cultures and belief systems, objects have long been used as vessels, carriers of energy and intent. Some are created to bless, others to bind, and when used in the context of witchcraft or dark rituals, these items don't draw attention. They blend in, they wait, quietly influencing, quietly draining. Epictetus once said, "Appearances to the mind are of four kinds. Things are either what they appear to be, or they neither are nor appear to be, or they are and do not appear to be, or they are not and yet appear to be." Cursed or charged objects often fall into that fourth category. They aren't what they seem, but they seem like nothing at all. Let me tell you about Jared. He had just moved into a new apartment. It was quiet, sunny, and felt peaceful at first. But within a few weeks, things began to shift. Jared started waking up at exactly 3:33 a.m. every night, gripped by anxiety and a strange, overwhelming sensation that someone or something was watching him. At first, he blamed stress, the move, the adjustment, the new surroundings. But then one afternoon, while vacuuming under the bed, he found something that made his blood run cold. A tiny leather pouch buried just out of sight. Inside it, hair, clippings, a rusted nail, and a piece of paper covered in markings he couldn't read. He hadn't put it there. Witchcraft doesn't always come with chants or candles. Sometimes it shows up as a bundle of herbs tied with red thread, a small jar filled with curious powders, a random coin placed at a threshold. These aren't random. They're conductors placed near entry points like doorways, bedrooms, or energy hubs in your home. Sometimes they're hidden in plain sight. In your clothes, in jewelry, in grooming tools, things that touch your body, your aura, your energy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." But that only applies if we recognize the obstacle. And sometimes the obstacle isn't a mindset. It's a thing, right there in your space. So how do you tell the difference between something ordinary and something intentionally placed? It's not just what you see. It's what you feel: discomfort, sudden nausea, fatigue, anxiety that makes no sense. Your body knows long before your mind can make sense of it. And if you ever do find such an object, here's what's vital. Do not touch it with your bare hands. Always use gloves, tongs, or another tool. Place the item in a sealed bag, preferably one that's kept far from your living space. Then, cleanse the area thoroughly. Sage, salt, bells, prayer. Use whatever spiritual tools resonate with you to reclaim your space. This isn't superstition. This is awareness. Because these objects aren't just artifacts. They're bookmarks inserted into the pages of your life by someone writing a story you never agreed to. Jared didn't find peace again until he removed the object with care, cleansed his apartment, and broke all contact with the source. In the last part, we saw how physical objects, especially those carrying strange energy, can anchor interference into your space. But not all spiritual attacks leave behind something you can see or touch. Some move through the invisible, riding the waves of the digital world we live in. Number 5. Unnatural technological malfunctions and disturbances. In ancient times, people recognized spiritual disruption through broken mirrors, sick animals, or sudden storms. But in today's digital age, the signs have evolved. Now they come as frozen screens, distorted audio, video files that vanish without a trace. And more often than not, these glitches don't just happen randomly. They strike when you're on the edge of something important. Maybe you're recording a voice note, writing something deeply personal, or trying to post something meaningful. Then, boom, your device crashes. Your file disappears. Your microphone cuts out mid-sentence. Most people would brush it off as bad luck or an outdated app. But what if it keeps happening? What if there's a pattern? Because just like everything else, witchcraft adapts. Today's energy-based attacks don't just move through people or spaces. They can travel through the same unseen currents that carry Wi-Fi signals and power your tech, your laptop, your camera, even your phone. When you're trying to share truth, speak wisdom, or process something sacred, these tools can suddenly become targets. Let's talk about Chloe. She was developing a podcast series on ancestral trauma, deep, emotional, and transformative work. But every time she recorded episodes around that specific subject, her files would get corrupted. Her editing software would freeze, but only on those recordings. She replaced the mic, switched computers, even changed locations. Nothing worked. Glitches followed her. Eventually, she stopped using tech entirely. She began journaling the same ideas by hand. And like flipping a switch, the static stopped. That's when it hit her. It wasn't a technical issue. It was intentional interference. Epictetus once said, "You must protect your mind as you would a citadel." And in the modern world, that protection extends beyond your thoughts. It includes the tools you use to share those thoughts. Because sometimes, the goal isn't to harm you. It's to silence your message before it ever reaches the world. So ask yourself, do your devices glitch only when you're working on personal or spiritual content? Does your Wi-Fi cut out when you meditate, journal, or pray online? Do video files mysteriously disappear after you record something that feels too real? If the disruptions are following a theme, not just a device, then it's not a tech problem. It's energy interference, and no, that's not paranoia. That's discernment. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." In our time, those thoughts are carried through code, signals, and sound. So when your voice keeps getting blocked through corrupted files, dropped calls, or malfunctioning gear, it's worth asking, who or what benefits from your silence? Here's what you can do. Start grounding your technology. Place protective stones like obsidian or black tourmaline near your devices. Cleanse the space with sound bells, mantras, or solfeggio frequencies, especially before doing meaningful work. And don't underestimate the power of spoken intention. Say it out loud. My message is protected. These aren't superstitions. This is spiritual hygiene. Remember, the Stoics didn't panic in the face of the unknown. They observed. They asked questions. They remained clear-headed and composed, even in chaos. So don't jump to conclusions. But also, don't ignore the patterns, especially when they show up right where your truth is trying to speak. Chloe reclaimed her voice not just by protecting herself, but by safeguarding the tools that carried her message, and you can do the same. We've just explored how interference can travel through the very tools we use to express our voice. But what happens when disruption doesn't just affect your devices? It starts bleeding into your daily life. #6. Unexplainable negative patterns that keep repeating. Yes, everyone has off days. The coffee spills, traffic jams, your boss is unusually grumpy, it happens. Life isn't perfect. But when the chaos stops being occasional and starts becoming predictable, when it begins showing up like clockwork, always hitting the same areas of your life, you have to pause and ask, is this still just bad luck, or is something else at work? The Stoics encouraged us to focus on what we can control and release what we can't. But they also warned us against drifting through life unaware. As Marcus Aurelius said, if someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change it. It is the truth I seek. And sometimes, that truth hides beneath patterns that repeat so consistently, they can't be ignored. Let's take the story of Dante. He was the proud owner of a thriving gym. Loyal clients, strong community reputation, and everything had been running smoothly for years. Then things began to spiral. First, his equipment started malfunctioning without explanation. Then, longtime clients suddenly canceled their memberships, saying the place felt off. A competing gym opened nearby and began spreading subtle, underhanded rumors. Dante also fell ill out of nowhere, after enjoying years of perfect health. It didn't stop there. Every time he tried to launch a new promotion, his website would crash. Every romantic night he planned with his partner, it fell apart. Miscommunications, strange arguments, or accidents derailing things completely. This wasn't just random chaos. It was coordinated disruption. So how do you tell the difference between life's usual bumps and something more targeted? Look for patterns. Does the chaos always strike right before a breakthrough? Do disruptions happen only when you're trying to grow, connect, or step into something meaningful? Does it always target the same parts of your life, your joy, your health, your career, your relationships? When setbacks follow a rhythm, when they seem to wait until you're just about to succeed, that's a red flag. Seneca once said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." But what if your suffering isn't imaginary at all? What if your fear is your intuition trying to ring the alarm? Because not all witchcraft announces itself through rituals or strange objects. Sometimes it arrives wrapped in perfectly timed misfortune, so carefully placed they're easy to dismiss as coincidence. But deep down, you know your own rhythm. You know when your hard work should be paying off. And instead, it keeps leading to dead ends. Some examples to consider. Your car only breaks down when you have a job interview. Your internet cuts out every time you're about to close a deal or record important content. Arguments or chaos erupt right before major family events or decision-making moments. That's not just life being unpredictable. That's a pattern. And it may not be accidental. After identifying repeated patterns of chaos in your life, the next step is clarity, and that starts with observation. Because what seems random at first glance often reveals a deeper, more consistent truth when we track a dot. So, what can you actually do? Start documenting. Keep a pattern journal. It doesn't have to be elaborate, just a place where you jot down when things go wrong. Note the time, the people around you, what was about to happen, and how it made you feel. Do this for a few weeks, and you may begin to notice something startling. The same names, the same locations, the same triggers, over and over again. That's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. And on the Stoic path, awareness is the very first step toward freedom. Dante, whose story we mentioned earlier, eventually traced his long string of disruptions back to a specific individual in his circle. It was someone who had once asked for mentorship, but who grew bitter when success didn't come quickly. Once he saw the link, he didn't panic, he took action. He cleared his space, both spiritually and physically. He set boundaries, and little by little, things began to shift. His health returned, his business realigned, his energy felt his again. You don't need to live in fear, but you do need to live awake. Because if chaos keeps finding you, and always in the same areas of your life, it's not just misfortune. It may be a sign, a message, one you're now equipped to notice. Number 7. Intuitive warnings and spiritual disturbances. Final sign may not make noise, but it's often the most important, your intuition. Sometimes, the strongest warning doesn't come through people, objects, or events. It comes from deep within, before your mind can even form a reason. Epictetus once said, "There is a divinity within us that perceives what is right and what is wrong." That quiet knowing, that tug in your gut, it's not just a feeling, it's your soul's internal alarm system. And when spiritual danger is present, that alarm gets louder. Think back to a time you felt an overwhelming urge to avoid someone, or a space you used to love suddenly felt off. Maybe you were about to take a specific route home, but something inside you said no, and later, you found out something terrible happened there. Or a new person enters your life. They're charming, everyone loves them. But something in you recoils for no obvious reason. That's not fear. That's intuition. And when it starts firing repeatedly, you must listen. These warnings don't always come as thoughts. Sometimes they show up physically. A sudden tightness in your stomach, around certain people, goosebumps in a specific part of your home, an invisible weight pressing on your chest when you walk into a room. These aren't random sensations. They're your body's way of speaking a very old language, one of survival. Because while your mind may still be processing, your spirit already knows. And dreams? They're often where the truth slips through most clearly. Has anything changed in your sleep recently? Many people under spiritual attack report recurring nightmares, being chased, trapped, watched by dark figures. Others dream of loved ones behaving in twisted, threatening ways. These aren't just random stories, they're messages. Because when the noise of the day fades, the soul finally gets a chance to speak. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So if your prayers feel blocked, if your meditations are constantly interrupted, if your once steady peace is now fogged by strange thoughts and inner chaos, ask yourself this: what has entered your spiritual space? Because when intuitive warnings start aligning with repeated disruption, what you're feeling isn't imagination, it's information. It's your spirit fighting to be heard. We just explored the power of intuition, the silent alarm that often speaks before any physical sign appears. But when those quiet inner whispers begin to line up with real-world patterns, emotional exhaustion, constant bad luck, or broken relationships, they're no longer just feelings. They become warnings you can't afford to ignore. So, how do you protect yourself? Start by trusting what you feel. Take your discomfort seriously. Write it down, track it. When do you feel off? Where were you? Who were you with? Don't rush to label it irrational. Instead, ask, what is this trying to tell me? Because Your intuition isn't weakness, it's ancient wisdom. It may be your first, and sometimes only, chance to avoid deeper harm. If multiple signs from this video resonate with you, brush them off. You have more power than you realize. Begin by cleansing your space. Use salt, sacred smoke, sound, or prayer, whatever speaks to your beliefs. Strengthen your energy through grounding rituals. Before entering difficult environments, visualize a protective shield of light surrounding you. Carry spiritual tools, like obsidian or black tourmaline, not as decorations, but as energetic armor. These aren't superstitions. They're practices handed down through generations, meant to keep your spirit aligned with clarity, strength, and truth. In the end, you're faced with a simple but powerful choice. Dismiss the signs and continue suffering in silence, or honor what you feel and reclaim your spiritual freedom. And as the Stoics would remind us, awareness is not fear. It's the beginning of mastery. So, wherever you are on this journey, start now. Stay grounded, protect your light, and above all, trust your intuition. If you're ready to reclaim your clarity, type "I claim clarity" in the comments. Your power isn't lost, it's returning.